Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Microsoft Reactor session entitled Build CI Workflows Using GitHub Actions. It's great to be here with you today, and really excited about the opportunity to spend about the next 60 minutes kind of walking through this process and getting some hands-on practice with it as well. So really glad you're here. My name is Alan Sanders. I will be leading the session today. We also have Moria on the line. She will be monitoring the Q&A session. So if you have a question as we proceed, please make sure that you enter that question in the Q&A, and she will make that available for us to kind of address. If it makes sense to address in the context of where we currently are, I'll do that. If it maybe makes sense to address a little bit later, I'll do that as well. I do see a question about whether or not the session will be recorded. It absolutely will be recorded and then will be available on YouTube, within probably a day or two after the event. So, definitely glad that you're here, but leverage that recording as well to kind of rewatch and rewalk through the session after we're finished today. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are the reactors? Just real quick, the reactors are an opportunity for us as a community to meet, right, as technology professionals, to learn from one another, to connect, to network. Now, in this day and age, it used to be that we would do a lot more of this face-to-face, but in, with the state of things the way they are currently with the pandemic, a lot of this has been online, but I believe it's still just as effective. So it's been great having the opportunity to connect with folks here through the reactor sessions. And, with technology, one of the great things about being in the technology industry is that there's always something new to learn, right? I don't ever expect to wake up and be able to say that I've learned everything there is and that I know everything there is to know. There always will be a new challenge and something new to learn, and that's very exciting. And reactors are a great way for us to get together, to connect, and learn from one another, especially about some of those up-and-coming technologies that, where we can leverage one another's experience to get a step ahead even faster. They're located all over the world, so we have a lot of opportunities to connect with folks. Currently, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and I know we have folks from Israel and London and all over the world. So it's great to really be able to leverage this as a medium for connecting and working to build out our technology skills. So build CI workflows using GitHub Actions, and CI stands for continuous integration. So we're going to be leveraging GitHub Actions within a GitHub workflow, within a GitHub repository to enable continuous integration. So we'll see here as we go through, we'll make changes to code, we'll make changes to our workflow, and as we make those changes and those get checked in or merged, we'll see that the workflow will kick off and automate specific activities, right? To build our application with the latest set of available source code, and then also to test it, right? To run it through a body of unit test automatically, providing us feedback if and when there is a breakage somewhere. So it can be a really effective tool for enabling a team to be agile and to move quickly in terms of software engineering and development. And we'll talk more about what that looks like as we kind of proceed through our time together. So again, just a little bit about me. My name is Alan Sanders. I'm a principal cloud architect. I have about 25 years of experience in architecture, development, and design. I've worked in several large verticals like finance and insurance, and then I've worked in some small companies as well. Done a lot of consulting. So the key thing that I want you to know about me, though, is that I am passionate about learning, both my own and others. So I hope you get a lot out of this session. I'm really excited to be here with you, and let's go ahead and get rolling. So what is our agenda for today. We're going to do a brief introduction around, sort of what we're covering off on and really the foundation of why we're here. We're going to talk just a bit about GitHub Actions. There are separate sessions that drill into GitHub Actions more specifically, and we will make some links for that available to you at the end so that you can, follow along there and continue that learning path, continuing to drill in. We're going to talk about GitHub Actions workflows, which are basically YAML files, right, that pull together different tasks that we want to have executed and automated, potentially in response to various events that take place on our repositories. We'll then walk through a demo, and that's really a hands-on thing, right? I'm going to provide you with a link. You'll be able to navigate to that link and actually follow along with me as I walk through the process. It leverages GitHub Learning. There is a GitHub Learning bot that sits behind the demo, monitors our activity on the repository, and it's actually very cool. It kind of steps us through the different things that we need to do to kind of walk each concept. And then as we execute that step, the bot will respond, let us know, did we get that step right? And then pass us off to the next step, moving us through the overall process. So really excited about that. I hope that you'll be able to sort of follow along and do that as well. If not during our time together, certainly you'll have the links and be able to do that after the fact as well. Depending on how we're doing on time, we may wrap up with a little bit of a knowledge check, and then we'll have a summary. And part of that summary will be a survey that you'll be able to fill out to just give us kind of some ideas on the things that you want to cover off on, right? What makes sense to you technologically? What are some areas where you would like to learn more and have more sessions, and that's really your opportunity to provide your voice around what would, be most effective for you in terms of learning and topics that we can cover in these sessions, right? Which is great opportunity to do that. Pardon me. All right, so let's talk about software delivery. And again, we just have a few slides here. I'm not going to go too deep into, I want to be able to get to the actual hands-on, but I do want to sort of set the stage for a couple of areas. So with software delivery, a lot of times, usually, right, in companies, our goal is agility, high quality, and speed. Right? We want to be able to adjust quickly to change in demand, change in business needs, new innovation. We want to be able to do it with high quality, right? We want the software that we produce to be of high quality, to do what it is intended to do, to meet the requirements that were provided to us. And if we can do it faster, that's better. Now, those are interesting goals. You probably could see how they would potentially conflict with one another, right? It might be easy to do one or two of them at the suffrage of one of the others, right? So what we're trying to do is find an approach that allows us to balance across all three as best as we can, right? And why? Because those goals help us stay competitive. Right? If we can respond quickly to innovation, it can be done with high quality, and we're able to deliver faster, then we can compete, right? It makes us more competitive. So continuous integration and really DevOps, so DevOps is a merging of development and operations. It's really about, really unifying the overall process end to end for software delivery. And so DevOps includes often two things called CI and CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery, or sometimes continuous deployment, depending on your organization and implementation. Continuous integration allows a development team that's working on a shared code base to continually integrate their changes across that team into a mainline branch and have automated tests and builds run against that to verify that it all works together well, right? So if you can imagine as a team, each of us is working on a different feature. We complete our feature, we submit a pull request, someone reviews it, approves the pull request, and our feature code gets merged into the main line. When that happens, we want a set of automated verifications to run against that entire body of source code. We want it to build, right? We want it to run automated tests to make sure that those various changes coming from different directions don't break anything and play together well toward the goals that we've established for the software. So we're talking about fully automated build and test. We're talking about triggering on events, right? So that when something happens like a code commit or a merge, this pipeline or workflow can kick off automatically, which is really helpful, right? And we'll see that in our hands-on session today. And then really what this does is it enables ongoing validation, right? It allows us to continually validate, continuously integrate changes with agility, high quality, and speed. Okay, so continuous integration. That's really what we're going to be focused on today. That's key for the software development process. Now, continuous delivery takes that, the output of that continuous integration, right, that build, and then automates its deployment into various environments. Could be intermediate environments in which the software will be further validated, or could even be automated deployment all the way to production. So usually the CD part of this triggers on the presence of a new build artifact. So the continuous integration or build pipeline will build the code, run the unit tests, and then provide output, right? Artifacts that it exposes as a result of its execution. Continuous delivery will pick up on the presence of those new artifacts and then will enable us to automatically deploy them to one or more environments for either, as I said, additional validation, or if we want to actually expose it to customers or stakeholders for their testing and review as well. And this is about enabling ongoing delivery. Now, this activity, a set of activities, if you can imagine, is a cycle, right? You probably have seen the DevOps, sort of diagram that looks like an infinity symbol. Because for a given piece of software, we're going to have the initial build. So we'll have the initial concept, planning, design. We'll develop that, we'll build it, we'll deploy it, operate it, and then gather input and feedback, right? That will then feed into the next iteration. And so as long as that piece of software is around, with DevOps, we can continue to run through that cycle, continuously improve and integrate on what we're doing and continuously build out even more features to that software. And so this is another sort of representation of that this CI/CD process is very cyclical, right? Continues around and around for as long as that piece of software exists. Okay. So what are GitHub Actions? Well, GitHub Actions, and I just, again, have one slide on this, but I'm going to point you in the direction of a link at the end where you can get even more information on this and dig in a little deeper. GitHub Actions are reusable, packaged scripts that provide actions or activities that we can plug into our workflows to automate specific tasks, right? So they're event-driven as well, but they give us the ability to automate things like checking out the latest version of source code so that we pull that into the host that we are currently running our CI or CD process on for execution, or setting up our node environment. There are a ton of GitHub Actions that are out in the GitHub marketplace that other companies and other folks have developed. You can actually create your own GitHub action as well. in the links that we'll be providing you, there's some documentation on how you go about doing that. We'll actually add a GitHub action to our workflow today from the marketplace that allows us to automatically label a branch on approval of a pull request. And if you can imagine, the action is going to automatically, so when that pull request is approved, it will automatically label with a given, sort of configured specific label. And then we can have a follow-up process that automatically looks for that label. And if it finds that label, can, then kick off another, like the deployment process or the delivery process. Okay. Pardon me. All right. So GitHub Actions, again, we're going to see some of them. I'll refer to them as we move through our hands-on today, but just recognize that you can create your own, or there's a marketplace of them available. And I will provide you with some links that you can leverage to drill in a little further. So GitHub Actions workflow. This GitHub Actions workflow is going to be an automated procedure that gets added into your GitHub repository. It gets added into a specific folder called .github/workflows. It's coded using YAML, which if you've ever done any Azure DevOps or, YAML is very prevalent in the DevOps world. And the YAML that defines the workflow is going to define triggers, when should it execute or kick off. It's going to define a set of jobs, a set of steps or tasks or actions underneath those jobs, and then runners. What additional activities do we want to do? And we're going to look at some examples. And we can basically build a workflow from scratch, right? But we can also customize one built off of an existing template. And that's what we're going to do during our hands-on session today. We're going to build one of these off of a Node.js, an existing Node.js workflow template. Okay. So here's sort of the high-level structure of what a GitHub Actions workflow entails. Probably have some kind of event that when this event happens, we'll know to, kick off the workflow. We'll have one or more jobs. And then the hierarchy moves down, right? Within the jobs, we'll have one or more steps. Those steps can include actions. Here's the GitHub Actions plugin, right? Here's where the GitHub Actions connects to the workflow. Or we might have, run statements where we just execute instructions as though we were on the host that's running the workflow as well. So you'll see as we combine these together, when we build our workflow based on the Node.js template, it's going to start with a single job, a build job. That build job is actually going to, build the code, and then it's going to run the tests. What we'll do is move into separating that so that we'll have two jobs within the same workflow, one to do the build and then one to do the test. And then we'll talk about how we manage across those two, sort of can GitHub Actions. All right, I'm going to check on the Q&A session. Can GitHub Actions be used for building infrastructure as code similar to tools like Terraform? Or would it actually be used to trigger a Terraform job, which builds the infrastructure as part of the deployment? And it can do both, right? There are GitHub Actions that you can use for building out the infrastructure, but then there are plugins that allow you to connect to other types of, tooling that enables you to initiate that build as well. So great question. Yeah, and that infrastructure as code, standing up, building out the the infrastructure that's going to support the workflow and the application, is definitely very important. Can you show us the best templates from the marketplace? We'll look at that briefly. It really depends on, I don't have a list of the best templates. It really depends on kind of the workload that you're trying to accomplish, the language that you're targeting. We'll look at that though when we bring up the Node.js template. But yeah, that infrastructure as code, enabling the ability to automate that infrastructure and immutable infrastructure as part of our deployment environment is definitely supported and is very valuable. Okay, great questions. Keep them coming. Really appreciate that. I'm trying to keep an eye on it, so if I don't see it right away, just bear with me. I'm trying to keep an eye on there. But this is the GitHub Actions workflow, sort of the general structure that we're talking about. Okay, so let's dig in it. And here's an example of, this is the base template, right? This is what gets generated for us from the existing Node.js template. So here's how the workflow is gonna get triggered. It'll be triggered either, it'll be triggered to a push to the master branch, or a pull request from the master branch, or on the master branch, right? So here's the triggers. Ooh, excuse me. Here's the jobs, and we only have one job. And just like other YAML, right? It's you basically, blocks are dictated by indentation, right? So things indented under other things indicate a hierarchy. So at this level, we only have one job called build. We're going to specify what host that job runs on. So it'll run on the latest version, host running the latest version of Ubuntu. We have strategies, matrices that we can leverage to basically, instead of targeting a single combination with these matrices, we can actually, in the same workflow, test different combinations of operating system and node version, for example. And it'll just be done automatically based on the configuration here. So instead of us having to have a separate workflow for each one of those combinations, we can build out a matrix, and the existing workflow will get applied across all of those combinations. And here's the steps underneath that job. Okay, we have an action. It uses this checkout action from the marketplace, a predefined checkout action. And that allows us to, again, pull the latest version of the source code into the environment for the workflow execution. We can have an action that allows us to set up node, and we can specify the node version based on each of the matrix entries that we have here. Then we can run npm CI. We can run npm run build if there is a build script present. And then we can run npm test. So each one of these steps will be executed in sequence. And this basically, on one of these events, will automatically kick off this workflow and walk through the jobs and its subsequent steps. But this can be customized or modified, and that's what we're going to do in our demo session, our hands-on session today. Okay. So we've got one question here. Is it easy to set up? Maybe that's a follow-up question to the GitHub Actions for building infrastructure as code. Yeah, I think what you're going to see is that it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to set up. Actually, we're going to operate all of our activity right inside of GitHub. No, we don't have to do that in GitHub, right? We could do it in a different tool that's integrated with GitHub, but you'll see we'll be able to specify what we need done. When we go to add a new job, a new step, a new action, we'll have direct integration with available actions from the marketplace that we want to leverage. So I think you will see that it is actually easy to set up. Now, depending on what you're doing, right? Depending on the activity that you're doing, that activity might have its own level of complexity, but plugging that action into the workflow itself is actually pretty straightforward. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question. If there was more clarification needed, please feel free to reach out again. Love the questions though, love the engagement. Please continue to keep them coming. All right, so couple of additional things before we then get into the code. Logs, right? So as we run these GitHub workflows, there are going to be a set of logs associated to them, right? And they will give us status on what's happening. They'll show us where things broke, and when we if they break, right? If they break, it'll show us where they're broken. We can drill into that step, and we can take a look at messaging around what caused that break, right? And it helps us troubleshoot where we are, gives us visual indication of success or failure. And then, as I said, we can drill down into that as needed to further, kind of troubleshoot what's happening. And then artifacts, right? So builds are most likely going to, produce deployable artifacts, right? Like containers or folders that need to be distributed or are pushed or deployed. There are two actions that we'll see in in practice here. The upload artifact allows us to push stuff out of our build step, for example, into a GitHub storage location. So that's the upload artifact. The download artifact allows us to pull that from GitHub storage into our workflow, right? So if you can imagine a build and a test job, the build job is going to produce artifacts that we'll need to upload. The test job will download those artifacts, especially if they're running on different hosts, which that's what we'll do in our demo. And so these actions allow us to manage, inputs and outputs for the various jobs that flow across a workflow. Now, this storage space in GitHub is free for public repositories, and it is, limited, has a limited free space for private. Okay. We're using TFS for CI and Octopus for our deployments. Should we be considering Git Enterprise to enable all these actions? Can we still use Octopus deploy? It's a good question. I don't honestly know. I've never done Octopus integration with GitHub. I know there are a lot of plugins available. I would not be surprised to find Octopus integration available within GitHub workflows, but we'd have to do a little bit of digging. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. Just don't have experience with integrating Octopus. But I will at least show you where we can, and maybe if we have a sec here, we'll do a quick cursory search to see if we can find something. And then trigger options. So I think this is the last slide I have before we move into the demo. Triggering our GitHub workflows can be triggered based on an event within GitHub, which we've already talked about, a push or a pull request, but they can also be triggered on a schedule, right? Or they can be triggered in response to other events, like if you approve a pull request. And so we'll see that with the labeling one I was talking about, right? On approval of a pull request, that will trigger a workflow to automatically apply a label. And that automatically applied label could then be leveraged, and you could be monitoring for that, and then a step could automate further activity based on the presence of that label. Okay. All right, so let's look at a couple of more of these questions here. Does the custom actions get stored similar to workflows in the repository? Can we share that custom actions with multiple repositories? It looks like I skipped out there for a minute. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Is an artifact an image or container? It can be image, it could be container, it could be whatever the output is of that build step. That can be the artifact, right? It could be files. So it really just depends on what you're doing. And so with depending on the output from your build, if it produces an image and or a container, if that image needs to get pushed to a registry, all of that stuff can be automated. Now, the upload artifacts action may not directly address it, but a different action would, right? Anything that's scriptable, right, can be plugged in. GitHub Actions, when you look at that a little closer, and you'll be able to do that separately. You can create JavaScript actions, you can create container-based actions. So whatever you can do there, right, you can accomplish from an action perspective. So GitHub Actions is the new kid on the block. Are there any jobs specifically that you think GitHub Actions still lacks behind existing tools? I've not seen anything yet, to be honest. Now, anything, any jobs, right, is pretty wide. So there may be some things that aren't quite ready yet, I guess, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But I've not found anything yet, right? It's actually fairly full featured and is continuing to grow daily. And here's the great thing: if there's something that's not there, you can actually build one to do it, right? So you can build a custom one and then leverage it. Okay, let's look at one more question before we go into the, and please feel free to continue asking the questions, but I see one more here. Is there now any best model for self-hosted runner models? My team are not allowed to use cloud-hosted runner because of security reasons. Yeah, that's, if you're not allowed to use cloud resources, I'm not aware of a GitHub Actions or workflow sort of on-prem implementation. There might be one available, I don't know. You might instead have to leverage, someone mentioned, for example, TFS, CI, and Octopus for deployment. You might have to leverage something like that if you can't leverage, cloud. Now, GitHub Enterprise, there are ways to sort of isolate yourself even further within GitHub, right? But I understand, depending on the security requirements, it just may not be allowed. But perhaps if you can take advantage of, GitHub Enterprise or something more isolated in the cloud, then maybe you could take advantage. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the sort of demo here. Let me grab this link and post this into the chat. I'll just put it here in the Q&A. Make an announcement. All right. So if you want to hit that link and follow along, I definitely encourage you to do so. So, okay. So build continuous integration workflows by using, this is Microsoft Learn, which I think is a great platform. It gives you step-by-step tutorials. It walks you through. It integrates documentation and demos and hands-on activities as well. Gives you some knowledge checks, and you can earn experience points that can, go towards badges, which is kind of fun. But there's a ton of there are a ton of technologies covered, a ton of technology topics covered. So I think this is a great platform. We're going to be leveraging this particular module. And so if I start the module here, this is going to walk me through introduction. I'm going to move pretty quickly through these slides. You can go back and read them. It basically reiterates what I've already walked through. Creating a workflow from a template, we're going to look at that. Logs, we talked about customizing templates. We're going to talk about directly, right, in action. And then we talked about artifacts. So I'm not going to go through this because we're actually going to execute it in the demo, and it sort of mirrors the slides that we already went through. All right, so here's the exercise, right? Let me close this guy out. You can basically click this button here, and this is going to take us to a learning lab in GitHub. Okay, And so when you come here and you click Start Free Course, it may log you in automatically. It may prompt you for login, but you should be presented with this dialog, right? You're going to create a repository in your GitHub account that is used for this particular lab. And I would keep it public right now just because then there are less restrictions. So we're going to click Begin, and it's going to, build out this repository under our GitHub handle, and then we can begin executing. So to begin executing, we hit Start here. And this is going to talk a little bit about CI, why it's important, continuous integration, which we kind of discussed already. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a templated workflow. So I like to hit hold down the Control key and then click the link, because that allows me to open in a new tab. So here is the under Actions, the available templates that you can use. And there's a few different ones down here. You can see here's a Terraform that someone was asking about. Deploy to Amazon, obviously deploy to Azure. CI workflows with Docker. So you can see that there are, a ton of available templates that you can leverage, or you can skip it and set up a workflow of your own. Well, we're going to start with this Node.js workflow, right? So let's see what else they have in CI. Java with Maven, Go. So, you can see that there are a ton of things provided and supported. Oh, someone's looking for the link again. Should be right in the Q&A session. Let me post it again. Hopefully that, okay, got it, good deal, excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and set up a Node.js workflow that's based off of this template. Okay, so under .github/workflows, it's going to build out a YAML file. We're just going to stick right now with the, just with the standard sort of what, out of the box. Now, the one thing that kind of comes along with the Learning Lab is you need to kind of use the same names and text that the lab suggests, because that allows the bot to sort of find and verify your steps. So I'm going to commit this to a new branch, and I'm going to call it specifically CI for Node, the pull request. So, and here are the, excuse me. Here are some of the actions we have available. Let's see if there's anything here, for example, with Octopus. Oh, there you go. So somebody is asking about Octopus. There are Octopus actions, right? So that's good. As I said, there's a lot here, right? It's a pretty powerful platform. But we're not going to pull any new actions in right now. We're just going to go with this. I'm going to create a new branch, commit it to that branch, and then I'm going to call it CI for Node and create the pull request. Now, when I do that, see, the GitHub Learning Lab bot is going to be able to, verify that I followed the step, and then it's going to take me to the next step, right? Great job. Just by adding that workflow, if I control click on actions, and that's how you see your workflows running, is on actions. If I look here, you see that the CI for Node has already kicked off, right? It's already kicked off a run of that workflow, because I said, right, when on push or pull request, it's going to initiate or execute that workflow. So it is running right now. If you click in, you can see the various logs that are being produced. We've got a failure here. We look at the failure, and it says that testing, the NPM test step failed. Why? because there are no tests in the repository, right? In the application, no test associated to it. So this is expected, right? Tried to run the test step. This is based on Jest. Jest expects there to be a test folder with tests in it. We don't have any yet, so that's why this failed. But you see, with the matrix, we could, target multiple versions of Node with the same workflow just by setting up that strategy in that matrix. So let's go back here, and it's going to say, all right, great, you ran it. Here are the various steps that we talked about. I mean, the various elements that we talked about. I'm not going to go too deeply into that other than just to reiterate this hierarchy, right? We've got a name for the workflow, an event that triggers it, jobs. Underneath the jobs, we have steps. Underneath the steps, we have actions. Okay, and we talked about what sort of each one of those are. And then run steps can be used as well to execute, code on the host as part of the build. All right, so right now it tells us that it's running and failing. If we go to the Actions tab, we can see, and again, we see why it's failing because no tests found. All right, so since it's Jest, right, it's going to be looking for this test folder, but that doesn't exist. So we're going to navigate to this open pull request. And then we're just going to merge this into our branch. This is going to bring a set of tests into our branch. I'm just going to merge it, confirm that. So great. And I can close this now. And that's why I often go to other tabs. I control click to open extra tabs because I keep try to keep a main thread that runs the bot, feedback to me. So great, we added the tests. We're waiting on tests, but we're still going to get failures, right? Let's go back to actions here. We can see there's a new run that's happening. So what's going to happen is we're going to see some of the tests have failed. They'll appear with X's by them. And then what the lab is going to ask us to do is to comment the name of one of those tests, right? That's how it checks that we're able to get to the log, see what's failed, and kind of read the log accordingly. So so we've got a failure here. So we see 4 tests failed, 7 passed, right? All we got to do is grab one of these names. So we'll grab initializes with 2 players. I'm going to copy that, paste it here, and comment. Okay. Okay, so we told the bot which test. Talks about reading the failed logs, right? So if we look at the log here, the tests that failed basically had to do with names, right? We passed in Salem and Nate. We expected the names to be Salem and Nate, but instead of Nate, we got bananas. Well, why? Because the code is broken, right? There's a bug in this code. So what we can do then is we can go in and fix that failing test, right? In this particular case, the way we fix the failing test is we fix the broken code. So we're gonna, and where we can see here that the game, it's in the game module that the tests are failing game.test.js. The Jest convention has a game.test, module name.test.js. So we can look here for our module name. Because it's game.test.js, we can be fairly certain that the problem is either in this test file or in the game.js source code file. And in this case, it's the game.js source code file. So I'm going to navigate up here to my code. I need to go to my branch. I'm going to go to the source. Open this game, and here we see, right, our constructor takes in a P1 and a P2, but we're hard coding P2 to bananas. That's our bug. So I'm going to edit this. I'm going to change this from bananas to, and then I'm just going to commit this directly onto the branch. Got a couple of questions here. Oh, great. Thank you for letting me know. Ooh, that's worse. Hopefully that's better. Thank you for letting me know. My apologies. I've got a really large monitor, so all right. Hopefully that's easier to see. Okay. All right, so that's our failure. We've made our update here. And now it's going to, rerun the tests. Make sure I check that in. I did. So if we look here, we can see there's a new set of tests, or a new workflow session that is executing. And now all 11 tests have passed, right? So now we've got successful completion on our workflow. All right. So what we've been able to do is build a workflow that can be triggered off of a specific event, have that event build or that workflow build our code, run our tests. We were able to see where there was a problem, fix it, and now we can merge that pull request. Okay, good. I'm glad the visuals are better now. Thanks for calling that out. I'm going to confirm that merge. The bot will kind of see that and say, okay, great, let's go to the next step. All right, so we've got sort of the initial down, right? Build the workflow, have that workflow executed, see some feedback in the logs in terms of things that might need to be fixed, fix them, and then move along. Well, now what we're going to do is customize this workflow. We're going to do a couple of things, right? We're going to test it against multiple targets. We're going to set up a dedicated test job. The build and the test are scrunched together. It'd be nice to have them separate. We're going to talk about, by doing that, our need to access artifacts. And then we're going to talk about some sort of best practices around, protecting our branches and enforcing particular policies around what needs to happen as far as checkouts and such go with our branches, right? To ensure that our process is protected. So we're going to edit our existing workflow. And we're going to target just versions 12.x and 14.x of Node. So all I have to do is go in here. I can remove 10.x, 15.x. I'm going to start that commit. It'll commit to a new branch. And let's see, this one needs to be called. Oops, sorry. Improve CI. So I'm going to commit the changes. And the branch name will be Improve CI. Oh. Create that pull request. Okay, so good deal, great work. We've got matrix builds underway. We're targeting 2 specific versions of Node. Again, same workflow, right? Same set of steps, or same job and same set of steps. but we can now apply it to multiple iterations of Node without having to repeat ourselves, which is great, right? Let's add Windows into the mix as well, right? So I'm going to keep moving, and as we go to the actions, you'll see that each one of these things is causing a new workflow to initiate. We'll look there when it really makes sense. But if I open this, I'm going to add to this strategy an OS collection that includes Ubuntu latest and Windows 2016. I'm going to commit that directly to my new branch. Let me close some of these. Okay. So now if we look at the logs, and I know I'm flipping around across multiple tabs, I apologize. It's just we're kind of trying to look at a lot of different things here. But what you're looking for is this information, this feedback from the bot. But if we look at this latest run, now we see we have Ubuntu latest 12.x, Ubuntu latest 14.x, Windows 2016 12.x, Windows 2016 14.x. We're going to have 4 basically jobs here executing, right? 2 operating systems times 2 versions of Node gives us 4 total. All right. So we've now been able to target multiple operating systems, multiple versions of Node. Let's now separate our build and our test steps. So let me edit this workflow. I'm going to copy the build step, or build job rather, and I'm going to paste it. Now you'll notice it's giving me an error because I'm got 2 duplicated keys. I'm going to change this to test. So now we're going to have 2 different jobs running on 2 different hosts. Okay, they're both targeting the latest version of Ubuntu, but they're running on separate hosts because they're separate jobs. We're going to remove the strategy, and I'm going to just tighten this up a little bit. We're going to remove the strategy from the build. The strategy is going to target more our test. We're going to need a checkout step in our build. We're not going to need a setup node. We're going to have a name. Let me just follow along with what it does here. npm install and build webpack. The run step is going to run npm install, npm run build. So you can see that matches with the build step here. And then just to make this faster, I'm going to just copy this. And paste it here. Now it's giving me an error because the indentation is off. There. Okay, so our test step is going to target the latest version of Ubuntu. It's going to leverage this matrix of targets for validating. It's going to execute a checkout. It's going to set up our node version. And then we're going to do an npm install and test. And this is just setting up an environment variable called CI. So now what we've done is taken our workflow and separated the build and the test jobs to run on separate hosts. So let me start, let me commit that. Okay, so we've got two nicely separated build and test jobs. Our custom workflow now accounts for testing dedicated. We're going to wait for the rest of those jobs. So we're just waiting after that the workflow runs. And what we're going to find is that, let me go up to actions here. We're going to find that this actually fails for a couple of reasons. So the build succeeded, but our test is going to fail. And the reason our test fails, I'll sort of give you the heads up before it reports it. The reason our test is going to fail is because we don't have the necessary artifacts, right? What it's going to tell us is, oh, let's go in here. And it says, I can't find this file or directory, public main.js. Now, we didn't have that previously. Why? Because everything was running on the same host. So the output from one activity was available as input for the other because they were all running within the same host. Now, because we've separated the two jobs, we've got the build running on one host, the test running on another. We need to make those artifacts available. The other thing that we need to do is establish a dependency between them, because GitHub Workflows is going to try to run these jobs in parallel if it can. Well, if test depends on build, which it does, right? We want a successful build, and then we need the output of that build to validate. We should put in a dependency relationship between the two. So that's what we'll do now. We're basically going to add an action to, and I'm just going to copy paste in the interest of time. Let me copy this. We're going to add an action that's going to use this upload artifact action from the marketplace. And it's going to push artifacts to this public location. Let me start that commit just to stay in step with exercise. Now it's still going to fail. So while we're doing, instead of waiting for it to fail, we're just going to turn around and also add right after the checkout step, the download. So if I go into the workflow file again, this is going to run a download artifact. So this is going to basically download what this uploaded. This uploads to GitHub storage. This host then is going to download from that same storage to make the artifacts available for it to test against. Now, the other thing we need to do is add a they're asking us to call it, oh, sorry, needs build. Right, so we need build to complete before the test job will kick off. Let me commit that change. And now if we go up here, we see this one failed, right? Because it had the artifact, or it didn't have the artifacts. Here we see now that there's a dependency between the two. And what we'll see after a couple of minutes here is that the tests will succeed. So we'll give that a minute. Once that finishes, we can merge. While we're waiting, we're really coming up on the end of our time together. So what I want to do is, in case anyone needs to leave, I want to make sure that you have this. Oh. Here's the survey link. Here's the event code in case you need to go. I'm going to keep going here for a minute. Let this finish. All right, so now our build has run. The dependency is maintained. Test runs after build. And now test begins to succeed. And each one of these will succeed. Everything's good. We can merge. We only have a couple of more things to do here. So if you can stick around, want to stick around, please do. All right, let's go to our next step. So what we want to do now is enable potentially the ability to automate the approval process, right? And by that, I mean, when the pull request approval happens, we can execute something in response. And what we're going to do here is label the result of that successful approval. So what we can do is create a new workflow file. And we're just going to give it, this name is fine. I'm going to commit that new file. That's going to set up a new workflow. If I were to go here under code, you see now under GitHub Actions, GitHub Workflows, I have two. This approval workflow is a new one. I'm going to add an action to that, or I'm sorry, an event. So on pull request review. So when the pull request gets reviewed, then it will execute this workflow automatically. And then we're going to add a job. So let's come back here. Okay, so we've created a new workflow, given it an event to trigger, and then we have a job, at least a skeleton of a job to execute when that happens. Commit those changes. And close some of these out. And now what I can do is add a step to that job. What you can, if you go here to the action, right, you can see how you go about using that action. So I can grab this, copy it. Edit this workflow and add that step. This step is going to be called label when approved. It's going to execute this custom action. And what this action will do is, based on this many approvals, I'm going to change it to one. When one approval happens, it will leverage this GitHub token as a secret in a secure manner to navigate to the branch and add a label that we name here. So when a pull request gets reviewed, this workflow will start. This workflow will then run on the latest version of Ubuntu. We'll execute this marketplace action that if there is one approval, it will use the GitHub token secret to navigate in and label the build. Now, if this was 2 and we only got 1 pull request to review, it wouldn't execute, right? This wouldn't happen. We need 2 in that case, but here we're saying 1. I'm going to commit those changes. And then the last thing we want to do is add branch protections. So if we go to the branches settings for our repository, we can add a rule. The branch name pattern will be main. And we're going to say require pull request reviews before merging and require status checks to pass before merging. So these are protections, right? Best practices that we can put in place for our main branch, that you can't merge into main without pull request. And you can't merge into main without the following things that we select executing and completing successfully. So here's all the things that we found in the repository. The ones we want are the build, which is its own step. And then we want each of these combinations of OS and Node version. When we create that branch policy, it's going to prompt us for our password. And now that branch protection rule is in place. And everything is good to go. And we could then take an opportunity. I'm not sure why that happened. That's weird. That's basically the completion. So what's happening is the bot is going to act as automation. The bot is going to basically see that on the approval of the pull request, it can automatically merge for us. Something weird going on there. So we're out of time anyway. But the next, I mean, that's basically the completion, right? Well, the last step we needed to do was apply the branch policies. We were able to do that. We can now, on pull request review, initiate a new workflow that will label on successful approval of 1, automatically apply a label. And then some automation process could be looking for that label. And when it finds that label, could execute or initiate some other automation activity. Okay. Well, that was a little bit of a whirlwind, a lot of information there. So definitely want you to have an opportunity to go back and walk through that. So a couple of things here. Let me give you this link. This link provides, if we navigate to it, gives you pretty much, here's how you build GitHub Actions, right? If you want to actually build your own. Building continuous integration workflows, which we just went through. And then, deploying to Azure. All right, so definitely additional learning paths to walk through, and I would strongly suggest you do, including going back through this one if you need to. Okay, the question was, is the session recorded? It is. It'll be on YouTube. Maria posted the link. It'll be on YouTube. If you look for the Reactor session, Maria, if you could post the YouTube channel again, that would be great. But definitely take advantage of this information, right? Go back through this detail, read through it, walk through the activities again. When you complete, right, when you complete your lab, when you're back here, what you can actually do is you can leave the course, delete the repository, and then basically start over again from the beginning if you want to, right? So take advantage of that. I think you'll find it helpful. I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to get just a sort of quick overview of GitHub workflows. We talked about a lot in terms of what you can do, how you can integrate actions into those workflows, and how you can use GitHub workflows to automate your continuous integration process. Hope it was very informative. Again, the link that you'll want to hit is this for the survey. And the session ID that you'll want to use is 501. Please fill out that survey. That gives us great information about what you want to see, what you need to see, and allows us to really target these topics to your needs. So it's been a pleasure being here with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have, and I wish you all the best. Thanks.